Hello and welcome to season 7, episode 3 of Dualistic Unity. I am coming at you live from Japan right now, enjoying a bit of traveling and experiencing things outside of what I typically experience and what I typically know and what I typically am used to. So it's been interesting. I'll probably get into a bit throughout this episode, but yeah, also have other stuff to talk about. But that's what I got for now.
I'm very excited to hear about the Japan adventures just because it's a place that I've never been to, but of course, it's at the root of so many things that I'm interested in. You have so many different things that are very different from our own culture. And so it's cool to be out of your own element, as it were, and just try to feel things out day to day. But you start to realize, I think, that that's what you're always doing is just feeling things out day to day as best you can. And what's nice about traveling, I find, is that it kind of reminds you that you never really know what's coming. It's easy to convince yourself you do when things are always the same day to day. Like you can go through the same thoughts, you can go through the same assumptions. This is going to happen tomorrow. I'll run into this person. I'm going to deal with that. Then a week from now, I'm going to do this. And you got a nice little schedule because everything's the same every day. But when you're on the move, especially in a new place, it's hard to set those patterns because you don't really have any familiarity. So you can't really build any kind of habit. And so it's really good because it teaches you that you don't really need to. You don't really need those things as any form of certainty or comfort. We tend to fall into them because, again, the same thing happens every day, or at least it looks like that. And so it's easy to put the same perceptions on every day. But when you're traveling, you're like, I'm growing, I'm seeing new things, I'm meeting new people. So obviously, I'm growing. And yet, every day when we see the same people, quote unquote, we're not. They're always different people. Everybody's always a different person. It's a different day, it's a different town every single day. And when you keep that in mind, yeah, it can leave you feeling a little untethered, but who says you need to feel tethered? Because you've always been okay on your own. So I am excited to hear about your Japan adventures. And of course, the insights that come from that, we're going to get a little bit more into that. I want to cover very quickly that we have our second round of investment opportunity coming up for Dualistic Unity. We're going to be doing a presentation at the end of June or mid-July, somewhere in that range. We have a lot going on right now, including our Canada Day celebration here in Nanaimo at the Port Theatre, where we're going to be supporting two very important local initiatives, the Food Share Society and the Fiddle Society, which is, of course, where Fidelium comes from, which everybody who is listening is probably familiar with. And if you're not, definitely go and check out the episode about Fidelium. Go and check out Fidelium as a whole. You can hear about them on Spotify. But it's been really exciting, but we are very busy. We have another retreat coming up in mid-July, mid-ish July. So that's why I say it's kind of a window for the investor presentation. But if you're interested, go to dualisticunity.com/invest because we have a lot going on. We have an opportunity at expanding possibly into the wedding industry, specifically in DJing and entertainment. We also have opportunities with a venue downtown that may become a 7 day a week opportunity for us to influence the community and get involved and raise people up and do the thing that we've always been doing. So I'm really excited about all this. And I just wanted to tap into that quickly. I was going to pass it over to Amanda because, of course, Amanda has been on top of almost all of the technical details. I mean, I got to give credit to Amanda for this. She's gotten in touch with sponsors, the venue, the band, and of course, the initiatives themselves that we're trying to support. All of this has been very much the brainchild of Amanda, as much as Andrew and myself are trying to be supportive. This really has come down to her. And so I just wanted to say, Amanda, thank you so much. We're so excited for this upcoming event. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what's been happening on that end?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I definitely, um, I'm glad that Dualistic Unity has gone in this direction because I am just as surprised. I never would have thought that we were going to go dive into karaoke and entertainment, but it seems like karaoke really is such a beautiful analogy for life, and for having taking that leap of faith. And so it almost feels like an inevitable result of all the effort and all the time and attention that both, you and Andrew have put in. I'm so grateful that you guys decided to start the podcast because as much as I've been putting in a lot of my time right now, I'm so glad that you two decided to take that step all those years ago because my goodness, life is unpredictable. Like karaoke, you don't know what genre's coming next. You don't know if someone's trying a new song. You don't know if they're facing an old fear or a new fear. It's just it's really beautiful, really cool to see. And it takes a lot of work, man. Life is awesome, but my goodness, you're the way that you spend time and attention really has its own ripple, right? Because we're always spending time, we're always spending attention, but the way that you do it really it has so much variety and so much depth. So now when we're looking to support the local initiatives, like Fidelium, of course, comes up because we have such a direct tie through you, Ray, and through Celeste being in Fidelium and being an incredible example of someone that is learning to trust themselves and learning to put themselves out there, which is what karaoke helps you do. And it's what the podcast was I always felt trying to discuss was trusting yourself, learning to just be faith, learning to move forward without the story, but not necessarily trying to get rid of or avoid the story because that's just another layer to this experience. So it's not about, eliminating, it's just appreciating and expanding just as a result, not as a goal. So I really love how we are trying to embody this conversation in our choices and helping Fidelium continue, because we all could use a little help. So helping Fidelium, we're raising money for the bursary that pays for kids to participate in Fidelium through the Nanaimo Fiddle Society. And then the Nanaimo Food Share Society is trying to make sure that everyone has access to food. And it's like, how could you not want to help, that kind of dream, become less of a dream and more of a reality for people because prices are going up. And so when we're talking about life, that feels so abstract. But, when people are hungry and having a hard time paying for their next meal, they're less focused on this conversation and they're dealing more with the day-to-day realities of being here and not so philosophically, here, like just we're here and here is full of it's just so full. There's so much to hear. And so as much as we can talk about it, we still are living it. And so it's that balance between this beautiful dream or this beautiful conversation and the how harsh life can feel, but it's always changing. So, a hard day doesn't get rid of the beautiful high moments, and the high moments don't get rid of those hard ones either, but you're not needing to get rid of anything. You're just expanding what you can take because you're seeing that you can take a lot more than you thought.
Absolutely. And yeah, all the things that are going on and playing out right now, they're incredibly exciting, with karaoke. And I'm in Japan right now, as I mentioned, which is where it all started. So I've been able to get a bit in myself. But yeah, as great as traveling can be, one of the things that I've realized in traveling and I've realized before is that you can never escape yourself. You can never escape everything that deep down. And I think the more aware, the more present, the more focused on your experience you are, the more aware you become of yourself. And so, Amanda, as you mentioned, all the incredible things we have going on, they are incredible. But as people have probably noticed, there's been a shift. There's been a shift in dualistic unity. And yeah, last year, I in the past year, quite frankly, I've been in my head, I think, for probably about a year. I mean, you could arguably say my entire life, but especially the past year in an attempt to, I guess, control my life, which was kind of my tactic for my entire life. And when I started to be involved in all of this, I felt like there were kind of two sides of me. And I think I'm sure people can relate, the side that you want to feel good, you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel better. And then the side that, deep down is you, the side that is free and untethered and willing to explore things. And they're always both kind of there, and it's on you. And what you are is the willingness to see, recognize both of those sides and make choices based on that. And so it's not really about the philosophical at all. Like that can be an expression of the actions that you take based on the choices that you make. But when you do make decisions that are all about you and you start making things all about you, which can be, that opportunity is always there. It doesn't go away. There's nothing that anyone can do outside of you to lead you in a direction that causes you to not do those things. And I'll be honest, we fucking started the podcast almost 4 years ago now, and you go through cycles in your life where things you're not as aware of yourself and you're comfortable, and then as you continue, self-honesty is a necessity to being free, and no one can do that for you, and no one can free you either. And so that self-honesty is of utmost necessity. And if you want someone else to tell you what to do, or how to live, there's going to be costs to that. And so, especially over the past year, I would recognize things, and maybe they were a little uncomfortable. Maybe I didn't want to share certain sides of myself, or even admit that I was insecure as fuck. That I was super worried about things all the time and afraid of things and trying to live up to other people's expectations rather than my own, because I had always looked to other people. And now I'll admit that on a whim all the day, all the time, that I'm insecure as fuck. And it's the most freeing thing. As soon as I remember that, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, okay, yeah. And me and everyone else. But when you do try to hide certain sides of yourself, or do try to control situations, or even think about ways to do the right thing, there is no right thing. There's a tension. There's a tension right now. But as soon as you try to look ahead and imagine, and as you look ahead, as you try to control things, as you try to, you know, manipulate things, fears arise in those states that feel more compelling, because you believe that, you can figure things out, you can control things, and with that comes the fear. And as soon as you're willing to let that go, it can feel like a loss, but there isn't so much fear there. And so, yeah, as much as dualistic unity is in a certain place, and we're doing our best as we go, like I take a lot, if not all, the responsibility for where we're at right now, because I did get really, really, really deeply focused on myself, and chose myself, have chosen myself, and what I wanted, and trying to be comfortable without so many sides, without the willingness to admit that I didn't know so much. So with that, things begin to change, but there's a side that you gotta look at yourself and admit those things before you can move forward. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've referred to it previously as the downward spiral, where you react to a fear, and then that becomes more fear, and then you react to that fear, and you reach more and more for a sense of control. You reach more and more for a sense that you can overwhelm that fear, and yet it just builds the fear. Every time you fight the fear, it grows. Because if it wasn't huge, why would you fight it? And so the harder you fight, the more of a demon it becomes. And yet, when you just admit you're afraid, eventually you start to recognize that fear as a very small influence on your life when you're aware of it. So that giant demon becomes a very tiny little bunny that you can look at and go, okay. It's funny because when I catch you from a certain angle and the light's behind you, you look huge. And that's really what it is with the fear. It's you have to look at things in a certain way for it to grow like that. And it's always in that sense. If I can just figure out my way around this, right? If I can just get this under control, as you said, then everything will be fine instead of just going, or I can just be afraid and continue on because I don't really know. And when you do that, you start to get a sense as you continue on that the things that you were so afraid of were never really dangers. They were just fictions that you had attached yourself to and somehow became worried that they would be diminished. And when you stop attaching to them, you could give two shits about whether or not they're diminished. Like we were talking about this recently, that in talking to other people without associating with a story to a large degree, and I don't want to say without associating to a story because you can't. And you, if you want to, sure, you'll end up in a coma or you'll never talk to anybody, period. But the fact is that you will always associate with a story. You have a story. You have your life story. You have all the experiences you've ever had and all the perceptions that you could possibly have about all of those experiences. And then you could explore all of those perceptions of all of those experiences, and you're still having more experiences. And so there's just an endless supply. But that's yours. That is the canvas and the paint that you have. But that isn't who you are by any means. And so you can carry that story lightly because it changes, because it can change. Because when you're beating yourself up, it seems like a fucking horror show. And when you're not, it seems like heaven. And so the stories themselves aren't the truth, but they feel like the truth when we're holding on to them. And it's in remembering that. It's in remembering. It's like, oh, right, this feels shitty because I'm holding on to it. I'm holding on to the thing that drives it when I could just let it go. And usually it comes down to just wanting to feel better, just wanting to feel better. And we mistake that temporary satisfaction of control with the feeling of freedom because they look the same. When you look at them, you're like, if I get control, I'm free. It's like, no, if you get control, you always need control. And now you can lose control and you have the entire spectrum of fear that goes with that. Whereas if you just don't need it, everything changes. Then everything's just an act of faith and you just keep moving forward. But that means looking at your story and understanding that it's going to keep changing. It's going to keep changing according to how you feel, according to where you are in terms of different levels of development, all across the spectrum of your life, from how you are with people to how you are with your cat, how you are with nature, how you are by yourself in a room. Like these are all things that we are developing at different levels at. You could be really good with other people, and then when you're by yourself, not so good. And so there's development that happens in that all the time. And yet we can hold on to a story that actually convinces us it's not happening. And then we wonder why we're in conflict with ourselves. It's like, it was because we're not who we were. We're not who we even think we were. We're not who we imagine ourselves to be ever. And the only way that we can really be what we are is just to be what we are. Period. Just be it. And have some faith in it. Let it unfold and you will see changes in your life. But it's but it's very much a trade. And I was talking to Levi about this the other day. You can focus on the character that you think you are, trying to improve it, trying to get it to a state where it's perfect and happy and valuable. And the more you do that, it's like the background scenery just decays. It's like everything around you just falls to shit because it's all about you, right? And you don't realize that that's divisive in itself because how can we realize that? We're afraid. We're like, this is the important thing for us to do. We did this in childhood, but we had a sense of protection there. As an adult, we don't have that sense of protection. And so we have to take that leap and realize we don't need it, that we're going to be okay, and that life is going to continue and you're going to continue changing if you just let yourself. Just let yourself. But that means feeling however you feel. And I'm going to stop with that because I could rant for another 5 minutes apparently. But it really does mean feeling how you feel. If you're uncomfortable, if you're going through shit like, oh my God, oh, I did this to my life. And I say this as somebody who has burnt shit to the ground. One of, and I said this earlier in a conversation, one of the most influential people in my life, and I won't name him obviously on the podcast, but he had such an incredible impact on my life. He gave me something to aspire to in terms of self-awareness, in terms of just overall interest in life as a whole. And when I look back at my life, he was the closest, or at least one of the closest people that I would ever count as a friend. But our parting words were in anger. And that relationship ended in essentially just a bonfire. And we never talked again. Despite how close we had become over years, we never talked again. And it's 15 years later. He is not a young person. He's more than likely dead now. And I'm never going to have a resolution to that. I'm always going to feel that. I'm always going to learn from that feeling. Because when I look back at it, sure, it was an authentic argument. It was caused by the circumstances and how I was feeling and where we were and everything else, his own choices, my own choices, all of that. But when I look back now at the state I'm in, I realize I didn't have to rise to that point. I didn't have to burn that bridge in the way that I did. But of course I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have that insight now. But that is the reason that I tread so softly now, is because of experiences like that. Experiences that, frankly, I will feel shitty about for the rest of my existence, regardless how much I learned from it, regardless like how much I turned that lead into gold. It still sucks. It still hurts. It's still a point of quote unquote regret. As much as I can accept I had to do it because of where I was, that doesn't mean that I'm going to willingly do it again. And it's because of that emotional content. It's because of that feeling that often we just want to fucking unload. I don't like how this feels. I feel regret. I feel guilt. I feel shame. It's like, yeah, I feel that. Just don't take it as the gospel truth. And before you know it, you're learning from it and continuing on without so much baggage. I'm going to stop talking now.
I think as you go through experiences like that, there's a difference in personal experience, and I've got, as you mentioned, there's times where you can feel very okay being alone and not be as comfortable around people. There can be times where you feel way better around people and petrified of being alone. And in the past few months, past year, like I've experienced both of those in the extremes, and they were things that I'd never experienced before, really. Like I always felt pretty comfortable being alone because when I was younger, I was afraid of being with people. And then when I was older, I really thought very highly of myself for a long time, and believed the story I was telling myself inside about who I was and how I was being perceived, and so I felt more comfortable being alone then. And I think there's what I will say that I haven't felt like I've experienced glimpses of it in the past, I don't know, 6 months or so, but there's almost like an intensity or a harshness to being yourself, not in like an angry way, but just in like I'm gonna fucking be me, and if you have thoughts about that, like fuck you, kind of. It's not like in anger or in, but there's almost a slight aggression to it that I hadn't experienced before the past year because I had never gone outside of doing the things that I thought were the right thing to do. And as you grow up, there are certain things that you look to get validation. And everyone has sort of, I, I've noticed how, your ego or your sense of doing the right thing, your sense of self can be curated based on an experience, an idea around people, certain people accepting you. And so as I began to expand outside of that comfort zone, I went from like absolutely fucking loving myself to not, because I was no longer fitting that perspective. But my experience in the moment was incredible. I was really enjoying my life, and there was this constant pull. And maybe that's always the case. Maybe that's always the potential when you're being yourself, is that there's going to be pulls from what you assume should be the right thing to do, because as much as we're, eternal and have always been, like, we have our experience. And I used to stay on that side most of the time, at least in how I spoke. But the experience of being yourself and being a person, like, you go through, the first 15, 20 years of your life, and there's a certain gravity, like an intense gravity, to wanting to do the right thing according to what you think the right thing is outside of the moment that you're experiencing, like the right thing that you should be doing. And as you had just mentioned, you can completely lose sight of your experience and what you're actually doing. Like, you can have your head so far up your fucking ass that you don't see how absolutely absurd you're acting in the moment. But it's like, when you're there, you get glimpses of it, like you're kind of aware of it, but there's so much that seems more important that you don't notice. And then as soon as that drops and you get a look at what's happening, like, don't look away from that. See that. It's gonna be uncomfortable. It's gonna be brutal. And but in those spots, that's when you have the opportunity to change and shift. But it's not a comfortable feeling when you start to notice. And everyone will get glimpses of that from time to time. But and or you can live there, and that's the state of freedom, is being aware. But it's intense as fuck, and it's to stay, as we've talked about many times. That experience of staying on the ball is remaining in that state and remaining honest and being in that state of freedom. Like, it's not, it won't probably won't feel good to that side of you that wants to do the right thing and get validation and be accepted by everyone. Like, you can't have both. And if you try to have both, your life is going to become a fucking shitstorm. And it's going to be caused by you trying to maintain a state of comfort and validation while being free. You can't have both. You can have one or the other, but if you try to have both, you're going to tie yourself up so tightly that you're not even going to remember which way is up anymore.
Yeah, it feels like it's an endless choose your adventure, right? I remember when I was growing up, there was books and it would be like you'd read to the end of the page and it'd be like, okay, if you're feeling adventurous, go to page 34. But if you're feeling maybe not so adventurous, page 12, and so I love that because I would read books over and over, and because sometimes I would be feeling more adventurous and I would pick page 12, and then I'd go there and be like, oh, that's so wholesome, that's so cute. And then we'd go to page 34 and I'd be like, whoa, didn't see that coming, even though I chose it and I told myself I wanted it. But then when it was happening, I was like, okay, I don't really know what I chose, because I had an idea of what page 34 was going to be. And then now that we're on page 34, it's nothing like I thought. This is unexpected, but it's endless choosing. Like, for us, the book doesn't end on, like, it's ongoing. It's every moment. It's not even every day, because in one day I feel like I've made so many choices to go in so many different directions, and because of a previous choice, it led to, you know something else that just is relevant to that previous choice, but it's not stuck there. And so, as much as, I feel like life is a story, it's more than that. And sometimes I feel like there are more selfish parts of me that are driving the story. And sometimes it feels like there is a lack of identity, driving the story. Because it's not like there's a selfless part of me. It's like there feels like there's more identity in a choice and less identity in a choice, but not no identity in a choice. And and that's not as terrible as I thought it would be. It sometimes feels like, strength and choice and responsibility and attention and awareness feels like a burden or a job or something like that. But it's just another choice. It's just another direction. It's just attention going in that direction. And it doesn't have to say anything. It doesn't have to mean anything, but it does. because I still bring all of my experience with me, which includes the parts that I identify with, the parts that I hold on to, the parts where I'm feeling upset or things are unfair or I don't have control or I'm feeling uncertain or I'm just feeling afraid, and all of that's there. And it just feels like it's another choice. And it it's just it just is what it is, in so many ways. And as much as it does feel heavy sometimes and it does feel super light, and sometimes even while I'm feeling lighter, I still feel like the story like gnawing in the background like a little gremlin, you know. But then when I'm doing something super selfish, I feel like there is a calm, just observing experience that's just watching it happening. So, it's like I don't feel just selfish when I'm caught up in a thought and I'm sinking into it. And I don't just feel aware when I'm not holding on to that thought, any thought in that moment. And it's just ongoing. It's an ongoing choose your adventure. And that sounds a lot more objective than, like today's a good day, today's a bad day, I'm wasting away my potential, I'm not living up to it. It's just a choose your adventure. It's just another choice. You don't even have to use the word adventure. It's just I'm in the midst of one choice, and that's really the best way that I can describe it. Because if I think of an opinion, the opinion almost always leads to a judgment, because I'm either making the opinion that I'm doing something good, doing the right thing, and then I'm getting high off of that. Like, ooh, I'm doing the right thing. That's right. I'm making right choices. Or I decide to make the opinion, or I decide to pick up the opinion, right? Because they're always there. I'm picking up the opinion that I'm doing something wrong, that I'm being selfish, that I'm not making the most of things, that, maybe I didn't make the most of today. It's like maybe I didn't, but that also gave me the opportunity to see that, there was another choice. Maybe even if I'm saying that the other choice is better, superior, doesn't matter. I still have acknowledged another choice. And I'm grateful to that. I was having a conversation earlier today where someone was talking about, the past and, how they're so grateful for where they are. But it was, and my response wasn't, wasn't to validate their choice now. It was just to say that, hey, the choices in the past are just choices in the past. And they are adding to this appreciation, right, that you're sharing with me for the choice you're making now. But it's just another choice, and it's not necessarily better. It's just another choice. And, there were times that I wish I could eliminate and delete or eject off the planet a past choice. But I'm so glad that I didn't have that power to delete a memory, to delete an experience, to delete a mistake, because I very much think of the phrase "forgive and forget," but I translate it through such a different lens now. Because when I was younger, it was, through a lens of anger, and I know my default tends to be anger, but it's only because that's trying to protect this idea. And I get so it's almost an automatic response. I just think anger because I'm like, what the fuck? But really I'm saying, oh my God, I'm so scared. Like something just happened right now and I couldn't predict it and I can't control it and I don't like it. And so I am scared, but instead of saying I'm scared, I'm saying fuck you. you know? And but that's okay though, because I appreciate that the fuck you is highlighting something that I couldn't see before, but now I can see now because I'm looking at those fuck yous through a different lens. So I appreciate all those past fuck yous and even the current fuck yous, because they're letting me know that there are other things that I didn't even realize I was afraid of, but I was so tense that I couldn't look at anything but one major fear. And I couldn't see that that major fear was just highlighting the fact that I am afraid regardless of what I fill in the blank with.
Yeah. And often it's just, I'm afraid to be myself. I'm afraid to be what I am right now because I don't think it's enough. I'm measuring it up to some idea in my head. And so I find it fascinating. I love this conversation for the fact that it's talking about reprioritizing. And I've said it before, I'm not a pleasant person. And I mean that for anybody who knows me well enough, you know that as much as I don't carry a lot of baggage and I tend to walk around with a fairly light load, as it were, I am doing things for me. And there is a point where I will just say, no, because it's not for me. And the reason is because there becomes a change in your priority where you're no longer looking at the character and how it fits into the story of everybody else into the future. You're very much looking at how much are you being honest right now? And it could be about fucking anything. It could be about anything. And that's really what it is. You're changing your priority. So if somebody comes along and they're like, hey, I want this from you, they're not actually going to say that. More than likely, they're going to butter you up looking for some kind of a compliment back, as it were. And because you no longer prioritize the buttering up, you just don't pay attention to it. And if they get upset with you, it's like, hey, I just gave you a compliment. And yeah, sometimes that weird shit does happen. Not very often, but sometimes people will actually say, like, hey, I just said some nice shit about you, not in so many words. And that's when you look at yourself and you reprioritize because the character you wouldn't hesitate to make that person happy so that you felt more valuable, or rather, the character felt more valuable. But you know what it's like to get sucked into validation, into that whole loop of needing it and giving it just so you can get it back. And that's the point. You know it, you felt it, you've went through the fucking cycle, and you're like, you know what? I'm not giving this any attention at all. But that's something you learn because at some point along the journey, especially if you've been sucked into that cycle forever, that come that situation comes up, and instead of just going, I'm not going to pay attention to this at all, you look at the person and you tell them, I'm not going to pay attention to that, and fuck you. And the quote at the end of that, and fuck you, is so
Yeah.
important. It's so important to hold on to because you have a right to be yourself. You have a right to live how you live. You have a right to prioritize things as you prioritize things. And if you recognize that as you do that, you will feel less fear because you are accepting yourself and not trying to protect yourself from things that were never a fucking danger. You're becoming honest with yourself. And you have every right to do that. And as you learn that and you practice that, you will just make choices you can live with when you go to bed at night because you know what it's like to make choices thinking it's the right thing or the wrong thing. And then you go to bed and you're like, was that the right thing? Oh my God, what would have happened if I did the other thing? And you get so fucking tired of doing that shit that when you make a choice, you're like, I'm doing this for me and I'm going to make damn sure I'm honest with myself right fucking now. And sometimes being honest with yourself is just admitting there's no right thing. I just got to make a choice. I just got to let the chips fall where they may, and that's all I got. And that's all you have, and that's your right. That's your will. That's where all of your rights come from, is your willingness to stand up for your right to be you all the time. And as you practice that, you'll have a softer touch with people who don't recognize that right because they're so caught up in their own character that they can't see you have an existence that is not the character they have in their head. And you have to stand up for that existence, but that means you have to recognize it in yourself that you are not the character in your head. And as you do that, you reprioritize things. And that's what changes. Your conversations change. And people learn pretty goddamn fast that there is a difference in how you prioritize your life. There is a difference in that you prioritize your life rather than their opinion of your life. And that's a whole other journey. It's like we spent our whole life going through the story just to recognize that now we have a choice to decide this is no longer my priority and actually live.
And it comes through you. It comes through your awareness of yourself and your awareness of your own ability to have the freedom to make that choice over and over. And as you become more aware of it in yourself, which I've had periods where I've been very aware of myself and been like hyper aware of like everyone and what they're doing and how they're acting and where they're coming from. And it's like, oh, that's interesting play there, interesting play there. But as I have delved into things and gotten really fucking caught up in myself, no awareness whatsoever. And there's a pull because that's all you get. There's a pull to wanting to get validation, wanting to get acceptance because that's all you got. That's all you feel like you have. It's not all you got, but it's all you feel like you have. And so when you're not willing to be honest with yourself or recognize that you're capable, even capable of doing those things, you're gonna want to get that validation from other people. And then when it comes to doing the right thing, what you were saying about that, I think the willingness to allow yourself to just make a fucking choice, just make a fucking choice. Because I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but in the past year, I think I maybe have spent more time in my life trying to make the right choice than living. Like actually, like if you know on your phone you get the screen time thing, you get to see how much time you spend on different apps. I've probably spent more because when you are so fixated on thinking that's all you got is making the right or the wrong choice instead of something inherent to you and an acceptance of yourself and a willingness to fall and stumble and make mistakes and a willingness to fucking make the wrong choice and learn from it because as you just said there's no right or wrong choice, so just make one and learn from it because life, there's not an end point. It's a fucking eternal thing. I had a dream last night that I was on this it was like this sort of pit like in Star Wars. I don't know if anyone's seen the when Darth Maul like gets chopped in or does he chop Qui-Gon in half? Anyway, that little pit he falls into, but it was like Rocky. And I was fighting people along it, and then I fell. And then it wasn't there wasn't an end to it. I just kept falling and falling and falling, and I was like, "Oh fuck, there's no end." And that's when I woke up, and that's both beautiful and scary at the same time because if you think about, "Oh, there's no end," it feels scary when you're thinking about that there's no end. But then when it comes to choices, when it comes to making the right or the wrong choice, it's kind of a beautiful thing because each and every choice, as much as it has an impact and has influence on everything forever, you get another choice and another choice. And you continue to make them and the previous choices inform the others, and so it's not so much, it doesn't become that external thing of making the right or the wrong choice, but it becomes more of an internal acceptance of yourself, like, oh, I have the ability to live. And then it's almost like it's about the choices for sure, but it's like where the choices are coming from that's more of the importance than the choice itself or the outcome of that choice. But when it's about getting the validation, getting the approval, living up to other people's expectations, it's all about that right decision, doing the right thing. And from my experience in growing up in the world, you know, the majority of the world is that sort of superficial, like, oh, hey, how you doing? How's your day? Pretty good. How's yours? And it's this like sort of comfortable sort of level of just a back and forth, people feeling good, being nice, but like being far from authentic, being nice, being kind, being personable, comfortable, like all those things that are kind of like the typical societal interactions, those basic things, they're not authentic. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily, but there's a sort of comfort that comes with them, but it's very superficial. And those those two are about doing the right thing versus being yourself. And yeah, being yourself is not always going to be comfortable. Making mistakes, messing up, doing the wrong thing is not a comfortable experience, but there's an additional experience that's built from the willingness to do that, and there's a faith in yourself that's built from just built being willing to make a wrong choice and live with it. Like and that experience is, I would say, far more important and freeing and allows you to actually continue living your life more fully than this just what can become a constant back and forth of trying to choose the correct the correct thing, which doesn't get you anywhere because you make the right choice and then you got another choice in like a few minutes that like that then you're gonna be fucking caught up in your head about that. So just make one and keep going and then that experience gets a little, I don't know. I don't know about easier, but more fluid is what it is. Yeah, exactly. What it is.
Yeah, well, it's going, you know. I don't know how it's going, but it's just going. That's why sometimes when someone asks me, how are you doing? I'm like, doing, Don't ask me to really elaborate on that, but I'm here, you know. We're here. There's a lot that's here. We're unpacking, we're packing, we're feeling, and when I find myself, not just trying to feel better, but just giving myself space to feel. I feel. I feel whatever happens to be there and I like to remind myself that, not making a choice is a choice, right? Like you're never not choosing. You're always in midst of a choice. It's just whether or not you're trying to give something credit for that choice or you're trying to evaluate that choice. But you are always choosing. You are always life. You are always living. You're always in this moment. It's just we tend to create a standard, or we have a tendency to create a standard and to think that, the standard needs to be met, or that's not, or you're not really doing anything. It's like, it took me a long time to enjoy rest days, to not have a full schedule, to think that, to see the something in nothing. You know what I mean? Like I used to think that like nothing is just like if a laziness, or it's a lack of enthusiasm, or it's a lack of participation, right? That's probably the word I like to choose right now is participating. I used to think that I wasn't participating unless I was checking a box on my to-do list. But I'm always here. I'm always life. I'm always making a choice. My rest days are a living day. The times where I'm quote unquote doing nothing, I am still doing something, and it's just being able to see the gray in the things that I want to be black and white, and being able to expand that grayness, or to just appreciate it in a different way, not more, because I think it's funny when I use the words more or less, because I don't really know how I can assess that. I don't really know. When I really think about it, I'm like, damn it, I don't think my ruler is pretty accurate. I think my tools are a bit just not as absolute as I want them to be. And that's just another way of saying things are not as black and white as I choose to view them. Even if I choose to view them as black and white, they're not actually black and white. Things, nothing and something, this or that. That's why I'm really finding myself appreciating both and neither more and more, because so many things are that, I'm not my story, but when I'm believing that story with all of my attention, that's very much my lived truth in that moment. It is very true. The story that I am holding on to with dear life is true, but it's also not true. Things do feel black and white, but they're also not. Things do feel gray, but it doesn't feel gray all the time. Like it is very much both and neither. And so as I'm choosing, it's like I'm always choosing, but then it starts to feel in another way like I am the choice. And so how could you be a choice and not always be in a state of choosing? It's just like a shape shifting. It's interesting and it's hard to describe because I'm trying to pin it down with words, and yet I can't pin down something that I don't know. I don't, and that's okay. I think that's the insight from the first retreat that I keep circling, and I keep swimming deeper in that particular insight that, I don't know, and I don't need to know, you know. Never mind the fact that I've never known and I've always been okay, because somehow that's not as comforting as I want it to be, because it's not control. So even when I admit that I've never known and I've been totally fine, I'm like, yeah, but that's not satisfying. you know? And it's just because it doesn't offer any control. It's just another way to embrace it is what it is, without that becoming a burden, and just seeing the opportunity that's always been there.
Exactly. Just continue on and things will become clearer as you do. I find it really just comes down to simplifying how we deal with things because we have no choice. We make choices. We are in fact choice, but then we make a choice and then we choose how we feel about that choice, what it means about the fiction of us. And now we have to make choices based on how we feel about that initial choice instead of just making the choice and not assuming that we know what it means about us and learning to live with that, learning to live with our choices and who we are. Because it's as soon as we start adding choices onto that in some desperate effort to feel like we're in control of a thing that does not exist, which is inherently the idea that we have a measurable value, that we can somehow separate ourselves from the rest of the living organism that is reality and measure our value in isolation instead of as a part of an organism that requires every part equally. That is all parts equally. And that's the whole thing. It's just to make your choices, live with them, learn from them, and don't overcomplicate it, thinking that you will ever know what the right thing to do was, that you will ever know what it means about you or anyone else, that you will ever have some sense of control outside of your attention on the moment you're on. And what's funny about that is that it's the attention on the moment that you are, which is a better way of putting it, in my opinion, that really changes your life. It just doesn't give you a sense of control, but it does wonders. It feels like magic, which is kind of funny. And I like the timing of this because this is why I know, Andrew, you were saying I take full responsibility to where our dualistic unity is and all of that. But the fact is, you're not an island. Every one of us has been growing as a person for the entirety of the podcast and of course before. We have all went through things. We have all dealt with different members of the community. We've all had different experiences, some of them very weird. And we have all gone through periods of change. But when we're looking at the choices, it's really important to look at how we choose to think those choices reflect on us and to remember that they don't. That additional choice is what fucks us up. I always look at the incredible, almost miraculous timing of things when I take my opinion out of the way. For example, Andrew, you are currently in Japan. You are in a place where we have a rich cultural history of people who essentially got to a point where they realized, and fuck you. And it became the foundation of the philosophy of Zen. It influenced Buddhism. There is so much in terms of people in a historical context having this insight, communicating this insight to the best of their ability. And there's still being remnants of people who honor that impact, even if they aren't practicing it. And so it's very cool to me that you are right now in a place that is reflecting an insight that you are working to deepen yourself, that you could not have had the priority to deepen had you not gone through the shit to the point that you did. And so I love the timing of things in that way. And of course, that's going to inform other changes. I'm going through other stuff. I'm not going to lie, man. The fact is that I became very comfortable with the idea of you and Amanda being here for me in terms of growing the company, in terms of having people to lean on. And what I've realized is that I was putting pressure on myself that once again had to do with my character. The fact is, I'm okay. You're okay. Amanda's okay. And because we have built such an incredible community, because we've built such an incredible organization over the last several years, we all know how to juggle things. We actually have the space, almost miraculously, as it were, to juggle things so that way we can all facilitate our growth when it's necessary. And so I don't think that there is anything for us to look back at and go, oh, that was a bad period for DU because it wasn't. Look at the conversation we're having right now. This conversation is informed. It is not just going through the paces. It is coming from a place that's real. And that has always been the cornerstone of what we've been trying to do here. And so, isn't it funny how things work out versus how we think they turn out based on our fears, based on our assumptions, when the fact is we don't know. And the more we accept we don't know, the more we can appreciate little patterns like that because we sit back suddenly and we're like, oh, that's kind of funny. If I'm going to go through this shit anywhere, why wouldn't I do it in the seat of Zen, in a place that's just enshrouded with Buddhist history and all kinds of really dope shit. Like that's great, admittedly, and I think it's going to lead to even more when it comes to the books that we're going to put out later because we have a couple of books on the go right now. In the background, of course, people don't be like, when are they coming out? It's going to take a little bit of time. Go and check out Proof That You're God, though, because honestly, we've been getting some really good reviews. We would love to hear your reviews. I really like that book. I'm very excited about it as a whole. And aside from that, just remember our listener, just keep going. We've been saying this since the start. Just keep going. And there's going to be periods where you get caught up in the idea of yourself. And then there's going to be periods where you question that idea and you feel a little uncomfortable, but you feel free because that's what it is to feel free. Birds are always entirely at risk. They're in the air. If they can't fly anymore, they plummet. And that ground's not soft. So if you want the freedom of a bird, accept the risk and recognize that it is only a risk to a fiction. So it doesn't really exist. This has been a really good episode. Andrew, I know that you are in an entirely different time zone, so I want to say thank you for making the time to have this call with us. I'm looking forward to the next episode. And of course, we are on Patreon on Sundays and every second Wednesdays, and we play video games together on Discord on Wednesday afternoons. And so if anybody would like to join us, do definitely check out any of those things. Patreon, of course, helps us out in that it supports all of our online endeavors, our efforts to connect with more people and more communities all over the world. We appreciate your support as always. Andrew, Amanda, thanks so much.
Great chat, and I look forward to the next episode.
That's right. Thanks everybody for joining us on this adventurous call, and we look forward to hearing more in the future.
Bye, everyone.